Just as we thought things were looking up for India on the COVID front, there now seems to be another variant of concern, Delta Plus. What is this variant? How is it different from the earlier variants? How much more potent is it? How much more infectious is it? And most importantly, is India ready to be able to tackle what this variant might bring with it? Avantika Ghosh, who heads our COVID coverage, is with me in this episode of Government Matters to help us understand this new variant. Please do start sending in your questions. Some of you, in fact, have already sent in your questions. Avantika, let's begin from the basics. What is Delta Plus?
So the basic of Delta Plus basically is Delta. Delta is what was known as the B 1.617.2, which basically started off from somewhere in Maharashtra, and we had this huge thing about whether we should name variants after countries or not, and India took great offense and all of that. So now we have landed with these Greek alphabets. So Delta Plus basically is it has one mutation in a particular area of its spike protein. Now, for two reasons, it's thought to be more transmissible. First things first, we have so far reported just about 40 cases in the country of this Delta Plus variant. That's this morning's update. Now, for two reasons, it's supposed to be more transmissible. A, because as I mentioned, this is in the spike protein, and the spike protein is what it uses to bind to the human cell. I think we spoke about this in Government Matters at some point of time, some months ago, that natural selection ensures that any mutation that helps replication, that helps propagation of a species, that is chosen over something else which does not do the same thing. So in this case, why we think this would lead to more transmissibility is because, see, the purpose of the virus is to replicate. So a mutation that gets chosen is likely to help replication. So that means it will replicate only when it goes from one person to another. If it just stays in one person, that's not going to help the purpose of the virus. That's one reason. And the second reason, simply because it's a variant of Delta, and Delta is known to be more infectious. So this is supposed to be more transmissible. But what is not clear is whether it is also more virulent. Because remember, none of these 40 cases that we have, none of them are serious. It's just that this random genomic analysis that we do, that has thrown up these numbers, and this is random. So it was not like these people's viruses
symptoms were different, right?
To genome analysis based on their condition. It was a random picking of samples, and this is what we have found. Though there are some reports, especially internationally, about Delta Plus or Delta variants, people who have been infected with this, showing more severe gastrointestinal symptoms, sometimes more severe clots, that could even lead to gangrene. And these are some of the reports that are emerging, but this is still a very new variant. So I'm sure as time passes, we will hear more of it and more of what it does.
So, Avantika, how alarming is the situation on this front, given that we've just sort of, got out of a very, very bad second wave? Things have been looking up for the last couple of weeks. And, how alarming is the situation given this new variant now?
One thing, no matter how many variants come, your mask still works, hand hygiene still works, social distancing still works. Nothing can take that away from you. Whether a vaccine, whether a variant is immune escape or not, whether it can bypass a vaccine or it can bypass a medicine, is a different conversation. But the three things that have kept us safe for the last 18 months still work. And, I can say this because I've been out, and masks work wonderfully. So whatever else you do, please continue to do what you were doing so far. get yourself vaccinated. Now, again, this is a very new variant. Though yesterday, the secretary in the Ministry of Health, he said that all the vaccines work on all variants. This is indeed subject to longer-term research because I was having some conversations this morning, and companies are beginning to sort of tweak vaccines based on these variants. So obviously there is a bit more that vaccines would need to do to target variants. Those things are already on, which is why, in fact, mRNA vaccines are at an advantage, because mRNA vaccines are very easy to tweak. Though the government of India's position also is that Covaxin, because it's a whole variant, it's a killed virus, that is effective against variants, because instead of targeting a particular portion of the virus, or what we're introducing into the body is actually the whole virus. So even if like 1 millionth part of its genome has changed, the rest of it will still work enough for the body to identify it and react to it as and when an actual infection happens.
All right. Okay. So let's take this question from Twitter. This is from a handle which is at BANMI. So Banmi. When will Delta Plus cause the third wave? So first of all, will it cause a third wave? And then, of course, the question of when arises.
Okay. So see, again, third wave depends on some factors. One is public health measures, as in how we behave, how the government behaves. So our behavior, I just mentioned what we need to do. How the government behaves, provided the government doesn't hold another Kumbh Mela or a few more elections. Also, how much contact tracing, containment, all of that is done. How much vaccinations are done. That is very important. And the fifth thing that is very important is what has been your population level exposure so far. That will decide your vulnerability. So if, again, to sort of explain the concept of herd immunity, if there are 10 people in a room, if 8 people, let's say if at one point of time 5 people have have been exposed to the infection, and at another point 8 people have been exposed to the infection, then obviously in the earlier case, those 5 have a higher chance of contracting the disease than in the latter case when there are just 2 people who don't have prior immunity to the disease. So I think going on, and this conversation I've had with several doctors, and many of them believe with a lot of conviction that we are not going to see a third wave, and that belief primarily stems from this estimate, and this is the Government of India estimate, that some 63 crore people in India have already been infected, which is like half the population of India.
Right.
And there are actually some measurements that for a vaccine that is about 60 to 70% about 60 to 90% efficacious, even a single dose coverage of 30% of the population could break the chain of transmission. That being the case, a 50% infection rate in the entire country's population actually leaves your vulnerable population at a much smaller proportion. So to imagine that the way this first wave happened and then the second wave spiked, imagine that the next spike will happen the same way, I think is a little sort of alarmist viewpoint. But at the same time, do not stop doing what you are doing.
Right. So no let up at all in COVID appropriate behavior, but hopefully there would be no third wave. Either way, please keep wearing your masks. All right, Gurbani, what's the end to new variants coming up? So I think that's something everybody wants to ask, Abantika. Will there ever be, what is the end to the new variants coming up? Will it ever end? Will there always be new variants?
No. Why should it end? I mean, if we are fighting back, the virus would also fight back. That is nature. And remember, this is selection pressure. The more we fight back, the more we try to defeat it, the more it will. And we have 10,000 things. We have science. The virus only has mutation to ensure that it propagates, it goes on. So I think mutations won't stop. what will stop and how infections will stop is, as I mentioned, is the population level exposure, vaccination. The virus will never say, okay, sorry, I give up. That
Right.
will never happen. This is how nature works.
Right. Okay, so I'll just club a few of these questions. There's one from Angel Sat on how whether Covishield, Covaxin, etc. are effective on the Delta Plus variant. There's Aryan who wants to know whether vaccines will work against a Delta Plus variant. There is Anas Siraj who also wants to know if the vaccine is effective. So there are many, many questions about whether this variant, is covered under the vaccines that we are taking right now.
Short of an actual trial, it is very difficult to give like a proper answer to that question. Like I mentioned, the government of India believes the vaccines work. See, at least for some earlier variants, we have seen in laboratory experiments, in petri dish sort of thing, not in actual humans, in laboratory experiments, we have seen that Covaxin works against variants. But a lab is not the same as a human body. That is
right.
That doesn't. It's not like a an emphatic yes. It cannot be. And Delta Plus, as I said, is still very new. We'll have to understand it a lot more. We'll have to see how it works, what it does. Right now, the belief is that it works. But see, here's the thing. Whether it works or not, at least we know that for the others it works. For the original, it works. And this is of lakhs and lakhs of cases in the country. This is just 40 cases.
Right.
So what we really need to protect against is not so much Delta, but why we need to take the vaccine is because it will protect us against the original and so many other variants. Delta Plus is a new entrant. We'll have to understand it more, but that should not in any way affect our outlook towards vaccines.
Right. All right. Okay. Now there are questions on the next wave, which I will club. Aditya Sanodoya, is the third wave going to be more dangerous than the second? SR, how many more waves will there be? Alan Joe, do you think the Delta Plus variant would influence the third wave? SR again, is Delta Plus going to be the reason for the third wave? Aditya, whether the third wave will come and when? Vishal Latte, whether there will be a fourth wave after the third wave? What will be the situation after the third wave? So really all kinds of questions on the Ashish Thakur, UK is suffering from a third wave. India will also probably get it. So, it's all these questions from all our viewers on, let's just break it down, whether Delta Plus can cause a third wave, how serious or how severe will the third wave be, and will there also be fourth, fifth, and so forth waves?
So here's the thing. If we have the only situation in which we will have a third wave, which is as big as the second or even bigger, is when there is a mutant, particularly if it's an immune escape variant. That is when we will really see a very, very virulent third wave, whether that is Delta Plus, whether that is Kappa, Gamma, Zeta, I don't know what that is. But a very high spike in the third wave will definitely be because of a mutant, if it happens, with whatever mutant that is. That's number one. Number two, when will it happen? So there are some modeling projections. We carried that IIT Kanpur story from Mona yesterday, which gave 3 scenarios. So the most plausible scenarios seem to be that somewhere in September, October, if we open up completely by July, let's say entire country is absolutely unlocked, everything is working, then probably we're looking at a third peak somewhere, or a third wave somewhere around September, October. That's one prediction. As for a fourth wave, fifth waves, I don't know. It really depends on what is most important, rather than mutants, is how much our vaccinations pick up. Because remember, after Monday's huge spike of 86 something vaccinations, yesterday it was down to 52. While it's still a good number, but it just shows that we are sort of looking at vaccinations as as one day achievements rather than we're looking at it basically in cricket terms. We're looking at it as a 2020 match, not even a one-day match, rather than a test match. Whereas this really is not even a test match. It's like an English Premier League. It's like a league.
Right. It has to go on.
It has to go on and on and on with the same tenacity, same intensity, all of that. So we are not even doing that.
Right.
So I think fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever waves will really depend on how much our vaccinations really pick up. And I'm not talking about some of these fantastic numbers that are being thrown at us, but some realistic estimates from the government on vaccine availability, on how much we can vaccinate, would actually be good to make these assessments.
All right. So, most of the questions I have are on these waves. I think you've covered that fairly comprehensively. But before we close, I want to know, Avantika, there was a meeting of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Science and Technology today. Was there any discussion on Delta Plus? Do we have any insights into what happened in the meeting?
Yes, there was a discussion on Delta Plus. And one of the things that Dr. Balram Bhargava told in that meeting is that right now we don't have any information to say that it is more virulent. We are doing genome analysis. Also, one of the points that was raised in the meeting is that are we doing enough analysis? Because remember, we've done just about 45,000 samples that have been analyzed to find out mutations and what variant and all that. So to which the DVT secretary, Dr. Renu Swarup, said that we were at one point of time looking at sequencing 5% of the samples, but now what we are really looking at is a geographical distribution so that we have a fair idea of how these variants are distributed across the country. So we are basically now looking at sentinel surveillance rather than a numerical sort of thing on genomic analysis. So yeah, that's more or less the conversation that happened on mutants.
All right. Okay. So Avantika giving us a very comprehensive 360-degree perspective on Delta Plus, what it means, what it can possibly mean going forward. But the crux of it all, the gist of it all, COVID is still there. Please don't stop wearing your masks. Keep maintaining physical distancing. And of course, maintain hand hygiene. These are basic do's which don't ever do away with anytime soon. Thank you, Avantika, for being with us on Government Matters. A big thank you to our viewers for sending in their questions. We were supposed to have our live today in the evening at 7:30 with our editor-in-chief Shekhar Gupta, but headlines ke piche kya hai won't take place today. This is in deference to the WTC final, which at that point will be really in the final stages. So we don't want our viewers to have to choose between the two. So tomorrow is when we will have headlines ke piche kya hai at 7:30 p.m. Stay tuned for that.